where the Jews had to take family names. And that was the first one, but over the next 50, 60 years, all the different governments in Central and Eastern Europe issued their own edicts. So it was between 1787 and 1845 that all the Jews were required to take the names, the Ashkenazic Jews. And why were they required? Because the government, in every case, they wanted the Jews to pay their fair share of taxes. So they wanted to know who was there. Also because they wanted the Jews to be able to be drafted into the army. And also in certain cases, they wanted to limit the number of Jews that belonged to each family. In other words, the number of children a family could have. And so there were a lot of different ways that people tried to get around it. We'll leave that for the 3-session class. But that basically, you should know that it was during that period that your family name was taken. So if, let's say, you know somebody named John Krakauer. Okay, so you know his family must have come from Krakow. So you say to him, your parents must have come, your ancestors came from Krakow. And he says, no, my parents came from Boston. And before that, they came from London. And before that, from Vilna. But it doesn't have to do with them, or them. It has to do with the ones that were living between 1787 and 1845 that were required to take the name. Great. Now, that's all the intro we have. And now we dig in with the categories themselves. And the first one that we'll touch on is the matronymics, the Mitternamen. So you see on the top line, it says Sora, or in Hebrew, some people say Sarah. Sora in Yiddish is also pronounced Sura, depending on the dialect. And so from the names Sora and Sura, there are a lot of affectionate variants, like diminutive variants. Sorele, Surele, Serele, Sorke, Surke, Serke. These are all first names. Serel, Tsire, Tsirel, Tsirke. And from those names come family names like Soris, Suris, Sirkin, Sirkin, Sorkin, Circus, Sorkis, etc. So the is suffix is the Germanic suffix, and it means of Surah, belonging to Surah. And the in, or the kin suffix, is the Slavic suffix, which means of Surah, belonging to Surah. So basically, the is the same as the kin. It's just one is a Germanic suffix and one is a Slavic suffix, and it reflects where the name was taken. So, for example, some people that we know with these names, there are famous pianists, Peter Serkin and Rudolf Serkin, classical pianists, and they had a great-great-great-grandmother named Serke, and that's why their name became Serkin, belonging to Serke. And there's a famous TV producer, Aaron Sorkin. He had an ancestor named Sorke, and Sorkin is belonging to Sorke. And you see the third name I listed there. I wrote Soros, and I put a line through it because I wanted to mention, lest anybody think that George Soros had a great-great-grandmother named Sora. No. First of all, you'll never find an OS suffix in an Ashkenazic family name. It's in a matronymic anyway. It's always with the is or an es, as you see later in the line. But also, his original name was Georgi Schwartz, or Schwartz, and he changed it to George Soros. So the Soros is not even the original family name. So that's why I wanted to list it there and cross it out, because A, it's not even his family name, but B, it's not an Ashkenazic matronymic. Great. Now I'll just do a little bit of Rivka. Maybe I'll just look. You'll see Rivka. There's a lot of first names, the possible ones, and family names that come from it. The only one I want to single out is the very last one, Rivisman. I'll list two of them. Rivisman. That is a kind of matronymic that is not listed in the Sora grouping, and that's man of Riva, husband of Riva. And so that is also a matronymic. And you might wonder, in what families was it where they took the mother's name as opposed to the father's name or the occupational name or something? In many families, the mother was the figure that was known in the town. she was the one in the market who did the buying and the selling. Who had the store or whatever. In those families, the father was davening or learning Torah or Gemara or Mishnah or whatever with his kollel, and so they didn't know him, but they knew the mother, and so they would take the mother's name. That's not to say that in every case where the mother was the one in town and the father was davening or learning, did the family name become a matronymic? It's just that certainly in every case where they did take a matronymic, that it was because the mother was the dominant figure in the family, the known figure. So I'll mention just one other name here in the line above, Riskind. Why is this interesting? Because the kind took the Slavic suffix kin and it Germanified it. Kind, as many of us know, is the German and the Yiddish word for child. And so just like Sorkin means of Sorke or belonging to Sorke, Riskind is child of Riva or Risa, child belonging to Risa. So it's like, it's a kind of a back formation. Instead of using the typical German suffix is, they took the Slavic one, kin, and made a Germanicism of it, making it kind. So there are many other examples that I could share with you, and there's a whole other page that I've prepared in this document of matronymics, but let's go to the patronymics. Before we do, before we take any questions, again, because there's a limited amount of time with what we have to squeeze in and the time that we have. If you could keep the questions to the more general variety instead of asking about your family names, because everybody would like to know their family names, and that would be like another 2 hours answering everybody's family names. And I love doing that, but in a one-session presentation, there just isn't time for it. But if you attend my 3-session workshop at the end of December or in January, February, you'll be able to ask all your family names, and I'll do what I can. But for now, if you could keep your questions of a more general variety so that they could be relevant to everyone, that would be great. So Cantor Baruch is monitoring the chat. And is there anything in the chat that looks appropriate to be asked?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay, I'm plowing ahead. So here we have the patronymics, the Futternamen, or Futternamen, or in the other dialect, Futternamen, depending on where you come from. So you have the name Avram, and the family names that come from that are Abraham, Abrahams, Abrams, Abramov, whether it's spelled with 2 F's, a V or a W, Abramovich, however it's spelled with the ICH, VITCH, ITSH. Those are all pretty much transliterations from Slavic, from Russian, where it's spelled one particular way. Abramovici, which is the Romanian spelling. Abramowitz, which is the anglicized spelling of the Slavic suffix. And then Abramson, if it's with the SOHN, it's the German spelling, and the SON is the English spelling. So Abrahams and Abrams is of Abraham, just like Saris was, and Rivkis, and it's like belonging to Abraham. Abramov is the same thing, of Abraham. Whether it's spelled with the OFF, the OV, or the OW, it means the same thing. Again, transliteration is imperfect science. So no matter how you transliterate it, it's spelled the same way in the Slavic original. And it means of Abraham, belonging to Abraham. Abramovich with the ich or ichi, or its in the anglicized version, means child of Abraham. So again, no matter which, in that third line, no matter which of the ways it's spelled, it all means child of Abraham, or son of Abraham. It can mean child or son. And then Abramson, of course, means son of Abraham. So basically you have 3 lines with lots of different looking names, but they all mean the same thing. I'm going to continue on this page. Yes, I'll go to the Yitzchak. You'll see the last name in Yitzchak. I'm just trying to focus on the ones that are different. Eisenman. Okay, so you wonder, how do you get from Yitzchak to Eisenman? Because Isaac is a frequent, in I think both in Germany and in Slavic countries, a pronunciation of the name, and it's also a Yiddish name. Isaac is also a Yiddish name, And so what they often do, not just with this name, but with lots of names, matronymics and patronymics, they kind of disguised it so it didn't sound so Jewish. So the person's name might have been Isaac, but they changed it to eyes, keeping the eyes so that they remember that that man was a part of the family, but made it more German sounding so that they could fit in more and sound like a less Jewish sounding family. So Eismann or Eisenmann literally Eisenmann means Iron Man. Eismann is kind of like Iceman. But either way, it was a German sounding version of the name Isaac. So it obviously is a patronymic coming from somebody with that name. Now you'll see that there's a star next to it. Whenever there's a star in this, whenever you see a star in this document, it means there are also other definitions of what the name could mean. Eisenmann is not only a patronymic. It could also be a professional name or a descriptive name of somebody who's really strong, an Eisenmann, or somebody whose profession was dealing with iron. Maybe he was a miner or whatever the profession is that finds iron, that digs it up, or that sells it. So it could be that as well, but it's listed here because it's also a patronymic after somebody who was named Isaac. Just skipping ahead, I'll cover one name on the bottom under Yankiv. It says Kaufman. That comes from Yaakov, and Kaufman is again a slightly disguised version, so it doesn't sound so much like the original Yaakov, which sounds really Jewish. And Kaufman is a Germanified version of that. And it's both a patronymic after the name Yaakov, but with the star there that you see, it's also a kaufen in German or kaufen in Yiddish, in certain dialects, kaufen. It means to buy. And so a kaufman could also be a merchant, somebody who buys and sells, and that's their profession. So I'd love to go through all the names, but again, in the interest of time, we'll skip ahead. But before we do, I just wanted to mention, I have a whole list of famous people who have some of these names. I'll just list three of them. Joey Adams, the famous comedian, his original name was Joseph Abramowitz. Eddie Cantor, the actor, his original name was Isidor Itzkowitz. So he had an Itzik, who was a grandfather. And one more for now. Piper Laurie, the actress, her original name was Rosetta Jacobs. There's more where that came from. So, but for now, are there any questions on the patronymics? Paula? Cantor Baruch, rather?
Someone's wondering if you could make the slides any bigger, but I think that's a function on your own computer. There's options to view at the top where you see the green bar at the top of the shared screen, view options. You can make it bigger yourself. I am wondering personally, there's not another question here. Are we going to hear about Bergs, Bombs, and Steins?
Yeah, different. Those are not matronymics and patronymics, but actually, actually looking under the patronymics, the second group where I mentioned Eisenmann, there's also Eisenstein, and that would be another version of a name Isaac. But it also is could be another grouping, which is the very last grouping that I'm going to get to. And Bergs, yeah, we'll get to Bergs, but ask me that question later if I haven't covered it. So any other questions? No? We'll move ahead. Okay, skipping the next page of patronymics, and we get to, why is this not moving? Oh, there we are. Descriptive names and nicknames. So here, in Yiddish, beschreibliche Namen or descriptive Namen und Ziehnamen or Ziehnamen edition. So you see on the right, kurz and kurzer, or in other dialects, kirz and kirzer, kerz and kerzer. That's how it's pronounced in Yiddish. If you know anybody named Kurtz or Kurtzman, that person that person's ancestor was short, or the opposite. Why? Because the descriptive names and nicknames were often ironic, like giving somebody who's 6'3" the nickname Tiny. And so that's why it's safe to assume that the person was a short person, but it could actually be the exact opposite. Similarly, if you know somebody named Kurtzman or Kertzman, however it's pronounced, however it's spelled, it's dialectical variants, transliteration variants, but it all means short man. Next, Klein and Kleiner, or in certain dialects, Klein and Kleiner. So all the names Klein, no matter how it's spelled, they are all, they all mean small person. So anybody who's named Kleinman, Kleinman, Kleinerman, however it's spelled, was small or the opposite. Next, Lang and Langer. So if you know anybody named Lang, Langer, Langman, Langerman, they were either long, tall, or the opposite. Gross, Grosser is the next one. So if you know anybody named Gross, Grosser, Grossman, they were big, they were large, or the opposite. And it keeps going. I'll just mention quickly, Fine and Finer. If you know anybody named Finerman, Fine, it's safe to assume that they were fine people. If you know anybody named Kluger or Kligger, Klugman, Kligman, it's safe to assume that they were smart. Shine, Schoner, Shinerman, Shane, good looking, and Grubber is somebody who is, in Yiddish, it can also mean somebody who's heavy, but more often for a family name, it's somebody who's coarse or rude. But notice there's stars next to the ones with the U, because those can also be a Gruberman, somebody who digs, a grave digger, somebody who did that as a profession. So there's another page of descriptive names, but for now, this kind of like gives you a little bit of it. Are there any questions on this category, or shall I? Yes, one.
Yes, Binyumen. Victor Snell is wondering, was it a myth that Jews had to pay extra for nice surnames?
It is not a myth, and I'm going to be mentioning that later.
Okay.
Good question. So that's the grouping that also reflects what you asked before, Paula. That's the last grouping, which is called it's called artificial names, fanciful names, invented names, and we'll talk about that. Great. Okay, moving ahead past the next page of descriptive names to the occupational names and metonyms. So here on the right, you could see Schneid, which means to cut. It also means a blade. And then Schneider or Schnader in certain dialects is a tailor or a cutter, somebody who cuts, but as a professional name, it's a tailor, no matter how it's transliterated. In Yiddish, it's always spelled the same name. It could be pronounced differently in Yiddish. As I mentioned, both Schneider and Schnader are acceptable pronunciations, but there's many variations of the transliteration. Schneidman or Schneidman is not the occupational name. You can say, oh, his profession is he's a Schneidman. No, it's a family name of somebody who is by profession a Schneider. So Schneider could be both a family name and their profession. Schneidman can only be a family name of somebody with that profession. And a Schneiderman, the same. So whether it's Schneiderman, no matter how you spell it, even without the SH, if it's just an S, by the way, that's a dialect variant. In certain areas of Lithuania, they interchange the S, the S and the Sh, the Sin and the Shin, or they did. And so it would be a daily occurrence or a weekly occurrence to hear somebody say, Good Shabbos. If they say Good Shabbos, it doesn't mean that they don't know Yiddish. It doesn't mean they have a speech impediment or a lisp or something. It's just because the sh and the sa were used interchangeably. So if you ever see a name that you associate with having a sh sound, and you see it spelling with just a sa, it's not a mistake. It's from a particular region. And again, it's not all of Lithuania, it's certain parts of Lithuania. So all those, the first 6 lines, any of those names are for a tailor. Now let's look at the next line. Sabo, whether it's spelled with a Z or without. What is that? The Hungarian word for tailor. Then you have Portnoy, whether it's with an I or a Y. And what is that? The Russian word for tailor. And then you have Kravitz, whether it's with a TS or a TZ, actually the IEC, the WIEC at the end is definitely Polish. No matter how it's transliterated, it means tailor, both in Ukrainian and in Polish. And then the next line, if you don't know that Taylor means Taylor, I can't help you. So certainly when they came to America, they wanted to anglicize it, but they wanted to still keep an element of what the family name was. They might change it to Taylor. So that's the occupational names. And then it says metonyms too. So you wonder what's a metonym. The names Nadel, in Yiddish Nodel or Noodle, in German Nadel, is a needle. And a metonym is when there is a word that represents something else. It's like when you say things, they can't agree on anything in Washington. So by in Washington, you mean in the government body in Washington. But you say in Washington, so that's kind of representing a different thing. And the name Nadel, which means just needle, or Nodel means needle, the name, that is a metonym. It's the needle representing what the tailor uses for his profession. It's like here in New York, there's NYU has a school, the Tisch School of the Arts, Tisch. So Tisch means table. And so what that is a metonym for a carpenter, somebody who built tables. And so there's a lot of examples of it. But anyway, anybody you know named Nadel, Nadler, Nadelman, Noodleman, it doesn't mean that they cooked noodles well. It means that they were a tailor by profession. And so this whole page is just the tailor names, and we haven't even gotten to other professions. And there are more tailor variants also of all of these. But for now, this gives you an example of one. You'll see on the next page, which I don't have time to go through, but I will just show you. Here we are. Go to the next page. You also have shopkeeper, sugarman, musicians, dealer, trader, etc. Lots of other occupational names. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. So are there any questions, Cantor Baruch, that you see relating to occupational names? No?
I'm just going to encourage people to put their questions in the chat so I can pass them on to Binyumen, but nothing right now. We're just, I think, riveted. It's just so fascinating.
Yeah, it's like my kids, when they said to me, who's going to want to listen to it for 6 hours? And, the fact is, I feel like I could speak on this topic for 12 hours and it would still be fascinating. There are so many names that we've heard our whole life. And who is stopped to think that the name means something? Our teachers in elementary school, the people we work with, our best friends. It's like they have family names. That's just their name. You don't think like that it means something and it signifies something that they have that name. So it's total. I'll be glad to answer your questions.
You just got muted accidentally, Binyumen, just unmute there.
Interesting. Okay. So I don't know what you missed, but it must have been good. So anyway, good. Okay, so let's go ahead now. And we're going to the lineage, Yiddish Names. So we have the word Kohen at the top, or Kohen, as it's pronounced in Sephardic Hebrew. So you have the names Kahan, Khan, Cohen, Kahani, Khan. Again, no matter how it's spelled, how it's transliterated with the C or the K, the A or the O, it's with the E at the end or without, it's the same thing. The family was Kohanim. And then at the next line, Kagan, Kogan, you think, well, what does this have to do with Cohen? I'll tell you what it has to do with it. It's exactly the same name. Because in Russian, there is no H. And so they use G instead of H. That's why instead of the name Horowitz, they'll say Garowitz. Instead of Hirschman, they say Gershman. And just basically anything that would be an H elsewhere is a G in Russian. So Kagan is the same as Kahan. Kogan is the same as Cohen. And then Kaganov or Kaganov, Kaganovich, no matter how it's spelled, it's the same as with the Abramov before. Kaganov means of a Cohen, belonging to a Cohen. Kaganovich, son of a Cohen, belonging to a Cohen. A Kaplan is the Slavic word for a Cohen. And then cats, you might think, that's somebody who deals with cats. If you know Yiddish or German, you know that that's the word cat. But no, one thing I learned from my father, and I mention this every time I give this workshop, and it's important for all of us to keep in mind. that he said to me once when I said, well, ich habe keinmal nicht gehört von dem, I never heard of it. He said, no, die ist nicht gehört von dem, meint nicht, dass es nicht voran. Just because you haven't heard of it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It's like every language has like tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of words and expressions, and who could possibly know all of them? Just because you haven't heard of it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. So it is possible that there can be found somebody with a family named Katz where they actually were a merchant of cats. Highly unlikely, but possible.
Question.
Yes.
Just going back a couple of slides, and this is fascinatingly by someone named Grossman. Why would anyone choose to be called something unpleasant, like a coarse man?
Oh,
Is that their choice?
No, gross wasn't coarse. Gross was large.
Well, Gruber or
Uberman was coarse man.
right.
Okay, that's a good question. That's a good question. In most instances, the authorities allowed the Jews to select the names themselves. In certain cases, that wasn't the case. And they decided it for the Jews. And so that's why often they were saddled with unpleasant names. And there are many examples of it, but it certainly wouldn't, nobody by choice would like give themselves a unattractive sounding name. So it was definitely the authorities that assigned it. Excellent question.
This is a never say never question. Have you ever seen the last name HaKohen?
I haven't. Yeah, actually, it reminds me, since you're all from Canada, I'm using Canadian terms. What I have to share with you in terms of Ashkenazic family names, think of it as Canada. What we have time for today is, in relation to that, the Maritime Islands, or the Maritime Provinces. And in my 3-session workshops, it's the Maritime Provinces, Ontario, and Quebec. But there's so much to share anyway. So let's move ahead. I was in the middle of the Cohens, so I wanted to finish with Katz. Katz is an acronym for Kohen Tzedek, the K and the Tz, and it's a Cohen. So anybody who took the name Katz is a Cohen, just like anybody with the other Cohen names above that. Bach is an acronym for Bnei HaKohanim. Sons of Kohanim. And Bach, you see, has 2 stars, so it could also be 2 other things. I don't know if we'll have time for it, but I did want to just mention I have a whole slew of people with names that are that have to do with this page, famous people. But Betty Comden, the lyricist of Broadway musicals and book writer, her original name was Basia Cohen. Howard Cosell, the sportscaster, his original name was Howard William Cohen. Rodney Dangerfield, Jacob Rodney Cohen. The list goes on and on. Let's get to the Levis. Again, whether it's Lewison, Levison, Lewinsky, whatever of these names it is, it means that they had a Levi in the family. So the Kohanim, the Leviim, and then Yisroel are the others. And so you'll see Lehman has 2 stars because it could also be a matronymic after a Leah, and Lehman would be the husband of Leah. But it could also be Lehen in German, I think it's pronounced, is to lend. So it could also be somebody who is a lender of money. And so that's why there's 2 stars next to that. And similarly, Lowenthal could have a couple of different meanings. Segal, or Siegel, on the last line, is an acronym of Segan Levia, member of the Levites. So anybody with the name Siegel, if not with the S-I-E-G, but S-E-G or S-E-I-G. So there, it's not interchangeable transliterations. Definitely a difference. It means they stem from Levites. And Shagal and Segalovich are 2 variants, 2 variants of the name Siegel. So everybody on this page is a Cohen or a Levi. I will give you one anecdote. I have a friend named Stephen Cohen, Shlomo Chaim Cohen, And he told me about his family name, that Cohen was not the original name. By the way, an important thing for me to mention at this point, that that whenever anybody does ask, whenever I do the 3 or 4 session workshops and people do ask me about their specific names, I say, please be sure that you're asking me about the original name, because if it's the changed name, I can't help you. I can only help you if you tell me what the original was. So he was telling me that his name is Stephen Cohen, but Cohen is a changed name. And the original name was Kugel, Kugel. But when they came to America, they decided to change the name from Kugel to Cohen because they felt that Kugel sounded too Jewish. So that's an anecdote that I enjoy telling. Good. So are there any questions about Levi and Cohen, Yichas Naaman, lineage?
No, we're good right now.
Okay, let's plow ahead. Okay, acronyms. I've dealt with a couple of them on the previous page. I'll just mention a couple of others. Oh, you could see how by the way, acronyms are in Yiddish is Akronimen and Rosh Tevis Namen, or Kürzungen is abbreviations. So you see, it's not written with dots in the Yiddish. It's written with quotation marks. That's how their names are written. And when they write their family names, people with these family names write Ash. So Ash is an acronym of Alt Schule. So somebody who belonged to the old synagogue, or Eisenstadt, somebody who belonged to the town Eisenstadt. Atlas, spelled this way, is an acronym of Ach Tov LeYisrael Selah. Truly God is good to the Jews. But Atlas also means satin. And so if it's spelled differently with an ayin as the 4th letter instead of the quotation marks, that is somebody who is a merchant of satin. Babad is an acronym for Ben Av Bezdin, son of the head of the rabbinical court, and it goes on. So you could see the Segal at the bottom, Segal Levia. I'll just mention the one right above that, Shatz or Satz. That's an acronym for Shaliach Tzibur, the messenger of the community, which is usually the person who davens before the congregation. And now Schatz is also a German word, which means beloved. There's a Yiddish song by Morris Rosenfeld. Nitzuch mich wo die Myrten grünen, gefind's mich dort mit mein Schatz. You won't find me where the myrtle trees grow, my beloved. And so that's Schatz. And but Schatz as a name meaning beloved is rare. Maybe it would be done just in Germany. But by and large, I'd say 99% of the Schatzes were Shaliach Tziburs. And if you've ever seen the name Satz, there was a Yiddish theater star named Ludwig Satz. And again, he was from that area, or his family stemmed from that area in Lithuania, where they interchanged the sa and the sha, means the same as Schatz. So are there any questions on acronyms and abbreviations? Yes.
Not exactly. But why do we see some of these Jewish names in families who are not actually Jewish? Do you think they denied their heritage, or why would that happen?
Like, give me what family name do you have in mind?
I'm just saying, like, let's say someone has the name Katz, but there's no Jewishness in their family. Like,
well, I don't know any Katzes that aren't Jewish, but I certainly have. I've met, for example, African Americans who have very Jewish sounding names. And I thought about it and I did a little research, and I put 2 and 2 together. Far more than the most likely answer is that in that instance, they descend from slaves, and the plantation owners were Jewish. And the plantation owners and the people who worked for that plantation owner took the name of that plantation owner. Probably in cases where the plantation owner was not a very nice person, they would have been happy to get rid of the name as quickly as possible. Now, most of us think of plantation owners, it's like slavery, it's like they must automatically be bad. I mean, certainly slavery is bad, but there were kinder and less kind people. And so the ones who have Jewish names, who are African Americans, most likely descend from from slaves who had Jewish owners.
One more quick one. Steve Handler asked about the name Sabo. Did we see that back in as a tailor, or is that a?
You mean SZABO?
SZ, you're American, ABO, yes.
Oh, you say Z?
Yes, we do.
So yeah, yes, that's Hungarian for tailor.
Right, okay.
Okay, good. Moving ahead, just so we can get to all the groupings within the hour. Okay, geographical names. As I've often said, people can spontaneously ask me their last names, and I can answer hundreds upon hundreds of names like that. But there are thousands upon thousands of names, and so there's nobody who can, even the people who put together the reference books, and there are some excellent reference books. There's one on names from Galicia, and there's one on names from Russia, and one on names from Germany, etc. They can't possibly have memorized all those names. They did the research, they put it together, and they know probably about a tenth or a hundredth of what they put in there. So we trust that what they put in there is accurate. But yeah. So the reason I mention that is because the names that, if somebody asks me a name that I can't immediately identify, 8 times out of 10, it's a geographical name, because there are so many little towns and villages, apart from the big cities, like towns, villages, hamlets, that people took geographical names from. Who could possibly know the names of all of them? Because I'm fluent in Yiddish, I know all the all the Yiddish man names, all the Yiddish women names, not all, but lots of them, and all the Yiddish words for professions and nicknames. But who knows every town in Eastern Europe? So this is going to be the tip of the iceberg. There are actually 3. With every other grouping, there's 2 pages in this Google Slides. With this one, there's 3 pages. And again, it's not the tip of the iceberg even. But let's talk about some of these names. Geographische Namen, Ortnamen, Toponymen. In Yiddish, the word is Polen, or someone from Polen is a Polyak. So if you know anybody with the name Polak, whether it's spelled with an A or an O, they come from Poland. Important thing to mention right now. The people who took the geographical names were not in that geographical place at that time. They had come from Poland. It's like, say, they lived in Vilna. Maybe they were talking all the time about their hometown or their home country in Poland. So people call, that's the Polyak. They would say, yeah, that's the guy from Poland. And so that would become a family name, not just in that case, but it could be with any of these names. With every one of these names, nobody took the name of the place they were living in. It always was of the place they had come from. So on the next line, Lita is Lithuania. A Litvak or a Litviner is somebody who is from Lithuania. So the names Litwak, Lutvak, however it's transliterated, Litviner, Litwiner, Litauer, all of them are somebody from Lithuania. Varsha is Warsaw. Varshaver is somebody from Warsaw. So here we have, if you have the name Warsaw or Warschau, I actually know a Diane Warschau. Warschauer, I know a classical musician, Jeff Warschauer. Warszawski, there's a famous Yiddish songwriter 100 years ago, Mark Warszawski. You might not know his name, but you definitely know a song he wrote. If you know that song, then it behooves you to remember the name Mark Warszawski. So his name was Warszawski, but he actually was not, he didn't take the name. The name came from before him. And because he was born in Ukraine, and Warsaw was not part of the Ukraine. So Warszawski meant his family had come a generation before from Warsaw. Now I want to point out here, Warschauer, the ER suffix is the Germanic suffix. I mentioned a similar parallel earlier with the matronymics, with the is being the Germanic suffix and the kin or the in being the Slavic suffix. Here the is the Germanic suffix and the ski is the Slavic suffix, but they mean the same thing, from Warsaw. So Warschauer and Warszawski are the same name. It's just one was given in a German-speaking territory, like the Habsburg Empire, later the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and the other in a Slavic-speaking territory. The next line says Vilna, and somebody from Vilna is a Vilner. So if you know somebody named Wilner or Walensky, like Rochelle Walensky, who's in Washington, D.C., working for the Biden government, then their family came from Vilna originally when they took the name, or before they took the name. Kroke, and somebody from Kroke is a Krokever, or in English it's called Krakow, also in German. And most of Poland was part of Germany, part of a German-speaking empire when the names were required to be taken. And so Krakauer is the Germanic suffix for somebody from Krakow, like David Krakauer, the klezmer clarinetist. Krakowski uses the Slavic suffix for somebody from Krakow. There actually is a actress. This actually responds to the question that was asked before. There's an actress, Jane Krakowski. She's a TV actress, a Broadway actress. She's not Jewish. She doesn't look Jewish. And she may very well never have been Jewish. But I guarantee you that her family, when they took the family name, whether it was in that 50, 60-year period, or if they're non-Jews before then, they definitely came from Krakow. Finally, on this page, Berlin, and someone from Berlin is a Berliner. So if you know somebody named Berliner or Berlinski, they're from Berlin. It means the same thing, Berliner and Berlinski. Notice that Berlin there has a little star next to it. That's just to remind me that Irving Berlin is not his original name. His original name was Israel Balin, or actually Israel Baline. That's all I saw all the years that I've known about his original name, and I've actually never heard it pronounced. And I don't know that anybody that knows how to pronounce it correctly. And so for many years, I assumed that that the name was actually Balin, and that it was a matronymic, and that he had a great-great-grandmother named Bala, and that's why they took the family name Balin. Baline is how it's transliterated. But I found out more recently that that was a guess of mine, but why would I not have known that it was a geographical name? Because there are so many geographical names, like I said before. It's a little town somewhere named Balin, and that's why the family took that name. So no, Berlin is somebody with the name Berlin is, or Irving Berlin anyway, is not from Berlin. Good. And as you'll see on the next page or two, we have Minsk and Pinsk and Vienna and Odessa, and then on the next page, et cetera, et cetera. But are there any geographical or habitational place names?
Kind of, Binyumen. This is a funny question. So someone who's participating here, their family name is Tenenbaum. What's with the Jewish name that sounds like Christmas tree? Is that a place or is it a tree?
It's a tree.
Okay.
Getting to it soon.
It's just a tree.
So good. Are we okay? Past the geographic names, topographic names. This is kind of like a first cousin of geographic names. It basically is like if somebody had a pear tree on their grounds that they loved, they might have taken the name Barenbaum or Birnbaum, in Yiddish Barenbaum or Birnbaum, and so or if they had a pear tree, I'm just using pear tree as an example. It could be any of these names after that, including a Tannenbaum. But just using the example of pear tree, they might have had a pear tree near where they lived, where everybody came to eat the pears because it was just like such a favorite hangout, and so they wanted to be associated with that tree, and so they would take. That's what a topographic name is. Certain collections and reference books use topographic to mean the same as geographic, but others don't. So I'm using it in the different way. And you'll see Bach here. I mentioned Bach earlier as B'nai Kohanim, son of Kohanim, as an acronym. Here, Bach would be spelled not with the two apostrophes, but B'ach, and it's the German word for little stream, and so that again could be somebody who lived near a little stream. love to bathe there, or love to loved spending time down there, or maybe they had a stream on their premises, and they took the name Bach. But certainly, no Jews took the name Bach because they wanted to be associated with Johann Sebastian Bach. That was not a justification. So good. That's the topographic names. House signs. I'll just go through this quickly. In Frankfurt, especially, but there were also some other towns in Germany where they had not numbers on the houses, like 3328 Bainbridge Avenue or 311 West 24th Street. They had signs representing things. What is not clear in everything that I've read, or I haven't yet found something that tells me clearly one way or the other, whether the family took the name from the sign that was on the front door, or whether the sign on the front door was built because the family had that name. Either way, in the ghetto of Frankfurt, they had an apple tree, a picture of an apple tree, a picture of an eagle, an Adler, of Adler, or Yiddish Udler, a picture of a goose, and so the family name Gans, a picture of a dove, the family name Taub. I'm just skipping around. Engel, they had a picture of an angel. You'll see the third from the bottom, Rothschild. So the Rothschilds were from Frankfurt. And Rothschild is the German for red sign. In Yiddish, Rothschild, but in German, Rothschild. And so they had a red sign. So with many of these signs, you can picture the sign. The next one, Spiegel, or Spiegel as the way it's pronounced, means mirror. And I don't know how a house sign could look like a mirror. I don't know how they would design that. But anyway, the next one, Stern, or Stern in English, but in German and in Yiddish, Stern is the way it's pronounced. That's a star. That certainly is easy visual. So this was especially in Frankfurt, but also in some other German cities. Let me plow ahead just so that I could try to get through everything. This is the last grouping. Artificial, fanciful, invented, ornamental, wealthy names, or in Yiddish, ausgepitzte, or ornamentale, or gewirrische, elegante, ziegetrachte Namen. So for the people, for the Jews who did not want to risk being saddled with a name that they would be embarrassed by, they could pay, and could pay for a name that they did not want to be embarrassed by. They did, and the authorities were glad to take their money. And so the people who took names that might be any of the names on this page, and there are many other examples, were wealthier Jews who could afford it, who could afford to pay for something that they wanted their family to be blessed with for generations. And if you know somebody named Diamant in Yiddish is a diamond. Shafir is a sapphire. Reuben could be actually a patronymic after somebody named Reuben, but Rubin is the Yiddish word for ruby. So somebody with a family named Reuben. It doesn't mean that they were merchants of rubies, though it is possible. It just meant they wanted a beautiful name. Golden could be several things. Most likely, they wanted a beautiful name because gold means gold. But also possible, and this is not infrequent, another kind of hidden name. A common Yiddish matronymic is Golda. A Gold is a woman's name, and golden meaning belonging to Golda. So actually, no, yeah, sorry, that was not an example of a hidden name. When you see down below, like Goldstein or Goldheim or Goldwald or something like that, those would be hidden names of somebody named Golda. So they kind of like wanted to represent something of somebody they're naming it after, but just disguise it a little bit. But just plain Golden would be truly a matronymic. Graf, Herzog, Kaiser. Kaiser means emperor. Herzog is, I think, duke. Graf is nobleman, or maybe I have those two reversed. But if you know anybody with those names, they paid for them. Then Wein, or however it's spelled, wine, Wein, Traub, Troib, Troib, it means Weintraub is a grape. So in English, most commonly you hear Weintraub. In German, that would be pronounced Weintraub. In Yiddish, it's usually pronounced Weintraub or Weintraub. But there is an actress that could be seen on AT&T commercials. You have AT&T up in Canada, yes? Okay. Her name is Milana Weintraub. And I love her name because it's Trub, and that Trub defines her geographically because it's only way in the east, in Bessarabia and in eastern Ukraine, that they say Trub. Nowhere else, not in Poland, not in Lithuania, not in White Russia, not in Hungary, do they say Trub. So just the fact that her family name is Weintraub and they kept it is just gives her away geographically. And it's very, very distinctive. I love it. And then here you have a column A and a column B thing. I'm not going to go through all of them, but many of the things here in column A, together with many of the suffixes in column B, would make for the beautiful names. Bloom means flower. Skipping ahead a few, Finkel means sparkle. Golden we spoke about. Hoff means hopeful. Koenig is king. Lichten is light. Morgen is morning. Rosen is rose. Schoen, we said, is pretty before. Stein or Stein, or Stein in English, is stone. Silber is silver, whether it's spelled Zilber or Silber. So those are the prefixes. And then the suffixes Barg or Berg are mountain. Baum, Boim, I mentioned earlier, is tree. Kranz is a Blumenkranz is a wreath. Feld is field. Garten or Gorten is garden. Gold, we know what gold is. Heim or Heim is home. Stein or Stein, I mentioned earlier. So actually, even though Stein and Stein is both in the prefixes and in the suffixes, I don't think you'll find somebody named Steinstein. I guess it's possible. But then Stern also is mentioned above. Tal is a valley. Tau is dew, D-E-W, that you find early in the morning in the grass. Wald or Wald, as it's originally pronounced, is a forest. Zweig or Zweig, as it's originally pronounced, is a branch. So mix and match many of these prefixes and suffixes, and you have a lot of the artificial and fanciful names. So we have gotten through all the groupings within an hour, and so I now, are there any questions that we have?
Just a few here or there. Pierre says he's commenting on the name Schoenfeld. And maybe he thought that was a farmer, but now he's thinking, does that mean lovely field?
Exactly.
Yeah. Farmer.
They're Schoenfeld, the names with Feld and Berg, do they have stars here? No, they probably should, because those could be geographical names also. Mm-hmm. There could be places called Silberberg cannot be a place name. The artificial names are the ones. Can you imagine a silver mountain? I mean, it's a beautiful image, but truly, I mean, the geographical names were named after elements of the topography, and you will not see a silver mountain. So with Silberberg, then you know that that's a made-up name by a rich person. Schoenberg could actually be a geographic name. Pretty mountain. There was a pretty mountain there. So there probably needs some more stars on this page. By the way, I see that there's some more names down here that you'll appreciate. There's a whole bunch of them, but I'll just list 2 or 3. Gene Wilder, the actor, his original name was Jerome Silberman. So actually, Silberman could be somebody who was a merchant of silver. It could be. But more likely, it was somebody who was who just paid for a nice name. Somebody with a similar name, Beverly Sills. Her original name was Belle Silverman. She's, of course, the famous opera singer. And one more of this group, and there's a lot of them. Tony Randall, his original name was Leonard Rosenberg. Rosenberg is a mountain of roses. Would there be a place named Rosenberg? There could be if there was a mountain with roses, for sure. So that could be an artificial name of somebody who just wanted that name, or it could be a geographical one. So good. Are there any questions? Other questions that you have?
Yeah, wondering if the name Zweig would mean be quiet in Yiddish.
No. Okay. So in Yiddish, Zweig, the name that's here, or the suffix that's here, or it's a word in Yiddish, is Tzadik, Zwei Waven, Pasach zu Yud Gimel, pronounced Zweig. The word you're talking about is with a shin at the beginning, Schweig. Schweig means be quiet. So actually, I do know somebody named Braunschweig. I never thought about what that means. The brown is brown. Schweig must mean something else because silent brown, a curious name. But no, if you know somebody named Schweig, it is different than Zweig. The Z in German, again, the Z-W-E-I-G is definitely the Germanic spelling. The official Yiddish transliteration would be T-S-V-A-Y-G, not Z-W-E-I-G, but they're pronounced the same. Yes?
Binyumen, we're wondering about Bob Dylan.
Yes, so Bob Dylan, his original name was Robert Zimmerman. Zimmerman is an occupational name. Now that's many of the occupational names, like I mentioned Schneider before, that's both German and Yiddish. Schuster, another one like Simon and Schuster. Schuster is a shoemaker in both German and Yiddish. Zimmerman, or in the original German pronunciation, Zimmermann, is definitely not a Yiddish occupational name. It's definitely somebody who took somebody who was Jewish who took a German name, though it could be somebody, again, referring to the question earlier, not Jewish, who took that occupational name. And a Zimmermann, which literally means a room person, was a carpenter. An occupational name, that's how you say carpenter in German. I guess somebody who builds rooms. In Yiddish, the word for carpenter is stoller, which comes from Slavic roots. And so if you know somebody named Stoller, S-T-O-L-L-A-R, or with an E-R at the end, or there was actually an actor, Lieber and Stoller actually were a songwriting team in the 60s and 70s. There was an actress in the Yiddish theater, Lyuba Stolarska. So it's got the Stolar with the ska, the Slavic suffix. All of them had ancestors who were carpenters, and they took it from the Yiddish word, as opposed to Zimmerman, who took it from the German word.
Wondering if you share your slides, a PDF of your slides.
That's a good question. When I do the 3-session workshop, then everybody has access to the slides for the whole period of the workshop. When it's just a one-shot deal presentation, especially when I haven't explained 2/3 of what's here, no. Let me just, if I could just mention quickly, and actually I'm going to skip ahead here so you can see my email address if you want to email me, binyumens@gmail.com. The 2 3-session workshops I'm giving, one of which will be an hour and a quarter each session at the end of December as part of the Yiddish New York Festival. Actually, that one will be in Yiddish. So for those of you who know Yiddish, you'd be understanding for 3 hours and 45 minutes of me talking Yiddish, we would be sharing this for a few days, and everybody would have access to it. If you don't know Yiddish, then that one is not an option for you. But I'm doing one for Class, California, 3 consecutive Sundays, end of January to mid-February, on Sunday afternoons. And so they will have access to the slides for 3 weeks. That's going to be an hour and a half each session for a total of 4.5 hours. And again, in those cases, people are invited to ask about their own names as well. I mean, general questions are always welcomed, but I endeavor to get through everything that's in this document and answer all the questions that people have. So again, write down my email address. By the way, the address next to it, info@yiddishchorus.org, is the Yiddish chorus that I conduct. I mentioned earlier, I conduct a Yiddish chorus here in New York, 36 singers, intergenerational. We're on YouTube. If you look up Yiddish Philharmonic Chorus, we have about 25 to 30 videos on YouTube. You can see our work there. And if you're interested in being on the email list of the chorus and of my future lectures, then write an email to either or. It's one. The email list is one and the same, and I'll be glad to be in touch with you and to have you put on the list.
I am a huge fan of that. Here's a funny little aside from Shell, who shares, my grandfather, who was born in the late 1800s, told me that they often chose fanciful names because they didn't use them between themselves, but when the Russians addressed people, it made the Russians sound ridiculous. Ever heard that?
I haven't heard it, but
It's a good story.
it's an interesting theory. It could be possible. I know that I remember when my father, when I was a child, I remember hearing my father refer to when he called somebody, when he spoke to somebody, another man of his generation, he referred to him by his last name. He wouldn't say Yoina, he would say Gottesman. He wouldn't say Moishe, he would say Shafir. And so I don't know that is certainly a tradition that I haven't heard about. I heard. But it could be that the tradition you heard about also happened. I'm not going to, again, like my father said, just because I haven't heard about it doesn't mean it doesn't exist.
Barbara Streisand.
I don't know if her name was changed, but any of us could easily look that up. Actually, a good place to look that up is in a Wikipedia bio. The vast majority of Wikipedia bios, they have the person's name and their original name, one right after the other, right at the top of the bio. And if it's not there, the next place to look is early years or childhood, like a couple of paragraphs down. If it doesn't say something like Barbara Schwartz in either of those two places, it means she did not have, it's not a changed name.
Gotcha. So someone just said, fascinating Yiddish rules. Glad I understood most of it. Most of it. Spoke only Yiddish in Israel until I was 6 years old. Thank you so much. Mr. Schaechter, what about your own name?
Okay, sure.
I think I hear what it is, but
okay, do you want to guess?
I think your family might have been a shoiket, maybe a butcher.
Indeed. Anybody whose name is Schaechter, Schechtman, Schechterman, Shockett, those are all American pronunciations of people who were Shochtim. The original pronunciations were Schechter, Schechtman, Schechterman, and Sheichet. Sheichet is a regional pronunciation also. And again, it doesn't matter how Schaechter is spelled, whether it's SCH or SH, with an AE or an A or an E, a CH or a C or a CK, that's all transliteration. In Yiddish, it's spelled one way, which is the way you see on this page, Shin Ayin Chaf, Tes Ayin Resh. And I'll mention, like I did with Schneidman and Schneiderman, as opposed to Schneider, that Schechtman and Schechterman, or Schechtman and Schechterman, were family names of somebody who was a Shoichet, or a Schechter. But you couldn't say he is a Schechtman, he is a Schechterman, just like you can't say he is a Schneidman or a Schneiderman. That's just their family name of somebody of that profession. One more anecdote on that topic. For many years, people have asked me if I'm related to Solomon Schechter. There's a whole Jewish school, a whole series of Jewish schools named after Solomon Schechter. So for years I said no. But ever since I started giving these workshops and presentations, I said, yes, we are related, insofar as we both descend from ritual slaughterers.
Binyumen Schaechter, it has been such a delight to hear your expertise tonight. I want to thank you on behalf of all of us that are here from 5 different congregations and beyond. We are so grateful for your expertise and the Yiddishkeit that you shared with us tonight. That's really going to stay with all of us. Thank you so much. And just a plug to the Yiddish Philharmonic Chorus. They are incredible. I'm a huge fan, always following what they're doing and really appreciating the music that you post. So thank you so much. And sei gesund, everyone. Should be well and be healthy, and blessings to very old years.
Thank you. Thank you, Cantor Baruch. Thank you, Rabbi Wise. And thank you all for coming. Ashenim Dank. Blabt gesinnt. Lo mehen git absiris. And lo mezach zein of simchis. And I look forward to hearing from some of you who want to be in touch with me. Feel free.
Yes, learn more. Thank you so much. Everyone, good evening, and go in strength. Have a good evening, everyone.
Sei gesund.